Okay, the day continues. So, we're very lucky to have Satyadasa here. Satyadasa, well, he's a non-practising solicitor, is that right? And he's also a professional will writer. He helps people to write their wills. And I mean, it's a practice in itself, isn't it? I think we've been reflecting a lot today on death and awareness of death and approaching our own death in a certain sense. And I think this is a really wonderful way of exploring that from a different angle. So I won't say any more. But thank you very much, Satyadasa.
Thank you, Satyadasa. Good to be here. Thank you very much. I was listening to the talk. We've just had that wonderful talk from Parinirvana, and I feel I'm going to sully the atmosphere now with administrative reality. Come on, there need to be documents underpinning reality, not just reality underpinning reality. So, but I mean, the Buddha, they didn't write things down in the Buddha's day, apparently, although you do hear that they may have had sort of writing for administrative purposes, but they didn't. And he didn't have any possessions, but I'll imagine that he certainly would have made very careful preparations. I mean, the whole of the Parinirvana Sutta, if you like, is his preparation for dying, and the care with which he puts into that. And I mean, you are quite a young room here generally, but I'm going to ask the question: how many people have got a will? That's about a third, maybe a third of the room. But you are quite a young room, to put that in perspective, so it's probably quite natural that even if we were a somewhat older room, that statistic wouldn't be much different, maybe half to 2/3. So wills are usually quite near the bottom of the to-do list. There is no doubt about that. They tend to come up to the top at various moments in people's lives, and actually I'm not convincing you. In this talk isn't about convincing you to write a will, because I've written many wills and I've spoken to many people, and people do it when they want to do it, and you sort of, there's a moment when you think, yeah, I'm going to do that. I thought I'd talk about, just touch on a few things. Well, obviously you're acknowledging the reality of death, so it is an opportunity to do that in very real terms. I'm not going to talk about all the technicalities of wills, there's no time, and as I say, I don't really want to sort of go into that, but we're talking about the possibility of creating harmonious relationships both in your life and after your life, and beneficial, ongoing effect of your life, and a kind of preparation as part of the preparation for dying. It's very important, I think. I really mean that. I think, that's obvious in a sense. In a sense, everything that I'm saying, you could say, is quite obvious. But one of the reasons I became a will writer was because I had a friend who died quite suddenly, and we had written a will a few months before he died, and he had no idea at that point. He didn't write it with any serious illness in mind. He was 60 years old, and he had a stroke, and he never kind of recovered from that stroke. He never had even 10 minutes to sort of write a will. And if he hadn't written a will, he had no relatives. He had literally no relatives. And all of his estate would have gone to the Crown. And as it was, it went to Vajrasana Retreat Centre and pretty much made that possible. But that's on the practical side. But on the kind of more spiritual side, what would it be like if we are suddenly confronted with dying and we haven't done certain things? There's many things in your life that you cannot sort out with documents. Just to say, you cannot sort out your life. But there are documents, and that could really be helpful at a crucial moment, at a crucial juncture in your life. And having them, I think, would allow one to enter then more easily into whatever the death process is, however you conceive of that. Because in the Dharma, of course, in Buddhism, death is as meaningful as birth. We all feel that the birth of a child is a meaningful event. It's surrounded by that kind of almost a halo of wonder, the miracle of life. But in Dharma practice, the death is that as well. Death is something that we can enter into. We have to enter into it, don't we? But there's a journey into it, and it's a meaningful journey. And having a will, and having maybe other documents you can think about, sort of if you lose your mental capacity, there are various documents called powers of attorney that can help people to manage your affairs. There's also medical directives. They're operative while you're still alive, but you don't have the mental capacity to communicate your wishes. But they can make life a lot easier for those around you who are caring for you. But obviously then it's going to be easier for you to go into the death process if you've given some attention to your will. And you don't write a will once and for all. It's usually what they call an ambulatory document. It kind of ambles alongside you. And then the last one is the relevant one. Yeah? That's why they call it the last will and testament. Yeah, it's the last one. What to say? So what do you think would be the main concern then? I'll just throw this out there. What do you think would be the main thing if you were thinking about writing a will and creating a kind of doing something harmonious or creating a beneficial document? What would be your main considerations? Anyone want to think about that?
I don't really know. All I know is that I'm an artist and that's what I've got that I can give.
Yes.
So that's about it. I don't own my house. I don't
Yes.
I own the clothes I stand up in.
Yes.
But I don't own anything.
That's interesting. So, some people think, I don't own much, therefore maybe I don't need a will. That's not what you're saying. Actually, in a will, you can express your funeral wishes. You can give away art. You can entrust things that you've created in your life to somebody who will be able to value that and do something with it. So you can make all those kinds of appointments in your will. And of course, we don't know what we might have in the future. Sometimes we hit the jackpot in life, don't we? In one way or another. So there is that to consider as well. But a lot of it's our things, isn't it? It's our personal possessions. So I always say to people, when you're writing a will, you're going to also write a letter of wishes as to what you want to do with your things, what they call your chattels. And you do that usually informally by letter, because your chattels are changing all the way through your life. So your art materials might go somewhere, or this kind of thing. So even if we don't feel we have a lot, actually we usually have something, and that's going to be really helpful for whoever is left behind, has to deal with our things, to know what you wished. It doesn't matter if it's a fortune or not. Yeah. And you can express your funeral wishes. Funeral wishes are not binding. You can't legally require anything to happen to your body. It's an interesting point. Your body is not your own possession. The Buddha said that, and the other law says that, really. Although it's a bit more complex than that. While you're alive, if somebody sort of collected your toenails or something after you cut them, whose are those? Who do they belong to? That is a moot point. I won't go into it. But you don't own your body, but you can express a wish, and that's tremendously helpful for the people who have to arrange your funeral, to know what you would have wished. And that's actually usually where the process of writing a will bites for people. I think many people write a will and they don't really think too much about dying, funnily enough. There's people who are young. So saying young people, when they have a child, often get a will because they think, I don't think I'm going to die, but if I did, it would be a catastrophe, and I have to appoint a guardian for the child. And so you've got that kind of awareness of death comes in through birth. Then you've got people right at the other end of life who really are just about to die. They're in hospital or in a hospice or something, and they know they're going to die. So there's a different atmosphere around. When I've met people like that doing wills, it's much clearer usually what they want, and they're telling you what they want, and they actually want it. But a lot of the time, people can just do a will without. It's sort of more of a practical thing. But when it comes to expressing your funeral wishes, that's when you can see a lot of people go, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to be buried. I don't want to be cremated. I don't want any of that." And other people, they actually kind of really want to get into that, and they want to express the details around that, and that's meaningful. What else? Anyone else? What's important when you're writing a will for you?
Something that's more and more important nowadays, I think, is the digital legacy, like whatever exists about you online, and also whatever you have stored as data anywhere in the world or in the cloud. Like, because if people don't have access to that afterwards, it just sort of disappears.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't disappear actually, but it's there and no one can access it.
I mean, there are companies that offer services around digital assets, and again, you know, some people are. I mean, I don't have all that written down myself, and I'm a will writer. So thanks for the reminder. You know, there's in Bleak House, isn't it? There's a Tulkinghorn, who's the lawyer there. He wrote the famous will that produced Jaundice and Jaundice or something. It goes on for 900 pages, and Tulkinghorn is killed halfway through the book, and turns out he hasn't written a will. I bet that's true of a lot of will writers and solicitors and lawyers. They don't have a will. But thanks, so there are companies that deal with that now. But you can always write, keep things, a record of things, that are key facts, because people will find those documents if you're reasonably organised and you keep your affairs reasonably well. When someone dies, the first thing you do is you go into their flat, into their house, into their rooms, and you look at their documents and you find stuff. It doesn't need super. You don't need a vault or anything like that. Write stuff down, but because passwords are always changing and everything, they have companies now that offer those kinds of services. What else? What would be
like what you value.
What you value.
Because I guess that's what you have, but like you said, if you have your art, that's incredibly valuable, especially if that's what you feel like that's the legacy of your life. That's incredibly valuable. Even if someone had billions of pounds, your art, if that's what's valuable to you, that's the most. That's more valuable than what someone else might think is.
Yeah. For the online, we're talking about value. What you value. It's a chance to think about what you value. It's for some people that's really, really clear what they value and what they want to give to. Obviously, it's a chance to, if people have children, they have families, very often they'll just want to basically give everything to their children and maybe give a few gifts to our friends and charities. The whole question of what you value is something that often comes up in the subject of what's a fair way to distribute my things. What's a fair way? Let's imagine that you do have a house. You do have, a lot of people have. Wills are becoming more contentious nowadays because a lot of people have properties and they're valuable. And a lot more people have a lot more houses that are a lot more worth fighting over, unfortunately. So you're looking to say, well, what do I value? And that could be in terms of a cause. But you're also, if somebody said to me, actually, what I really love is my son, but I can't stand my daughter, so I'm not going to include her. Or I'll give her something. But my first duty would be to say, well, have you thought about that really? What's the effects of that? It's perfectly, you can do that under English law. If you don't give enough to certain family members, like a spouse or children, particularly young children, but also even adult children, there is some recourse under the law for them, so they might be able to instigate a case to claim some reasonable provision, and that can be very unpleasant. So it even if they don't succeed, it creates a great deal of disharmony. So what's fair between, and the starting point would always be, well, have you thought about that? Well, what's fair between, and some people say, oh no, my son, I really love my son, but he doesn't have, he's a millionaire, he doesn't need it. And I always then say, well, have you checked that out with him? Because that may be true, and often it is true. Often it is true that people are actually quite happy for things to go to other siblings or charities. A lot of my clients are Buddhists who've given their lives to charities, and a lot of their children, have been understanding that some of their parents want to give to charities that they've been involved in all their lives. but sometimes not. And what you don't want to set up is a shock and a surprise. You don't want to create an unpleasant scene right at the, well, a week after you've died. Then somebody gets a shock that they, and actually even if someone's a millionaire or they've got millions and millions and millions, unfortunately, you know, that people being given property by your parents, and particularly arguments between siblings, it creates a lot of problems. Can do. So you really, it's a chance to reflect on fairness, on what you value, and come to some reasonable kind of compromise, maybe, or a sense of that, and that will keep changing as you go through your life. So sometimes that will be really clear, other times it will be less clear. Then other people come into your life. So thing that now is very common is second families. Relationships breaking up, then second families, that can be very confusing. So often when you get into people who are in their sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, it's quite hard actually. Sometimes there's quite a lot of tax comes up, and all these practical questions. So it can be quite hard, but it also can be quite straightforward. So you shouldn't be put off from making a will by. And one of the benefits of going to, say, a solicitor is that you get to speak to somebody who has experience of seeing hundreds of people and may be able to make a suggestion that resolves whatever complication is in your mind. Because it's often that people start thinking about it in their own minds and then they just sort of get into a muddle, and then they think, I'm not going to die just yet, so we'll leave that. Yeah. What any other questions that come up? We've just got a few more minutes. Maybe there's some online, I don't know. Yeah.
In terms of key people, trustees, executors and administrators as well. That's quite technical, but that's something you consider as well, especially with an executor.
Yes.
Have to be someone you trust.
Yeah. So I'll just say then basically when you write a will, the first thing that you do is you revoke all the previous wills. The second thing you do usually is to appoint an executor or executors. And these are the people who stand in for you when you've died. And that's usually in the case of close family members, or it could be a friend, it could be 2-3 people, and you could have replacements. But they execute your will. That's quite a literal phrase, isn't it? They do what your wishes are. They are trustees. They receive all your property when you die. Technically speaking, it's theirs, held in trust. They have to, usually with a professional, but not always, they will deal with the tax and the legalities and the administration, and then they will give out your property according to your will. So choosing trustees is really important, and there's a bit more to say about that. So you've got trustees, and then often it's like giving away your things, like your personal possessions, and then give your funeral wishes. And then giving away specific legacies, £1,000 to this person, or my car to this person, or whatever it is. And then the residue of your estate, which is whatever's left after all your debts have been paid, all your taxes and everything. And then you give that away as a percentage. So it's actually quite sort of a standard form to a will. Any other questions? Thoughts about will?
What did you call possessions again? Was it
chattels? It's a nice old English word, yeah.
Yes.
It means any movable object. And I was doing somebody who had a houseboat the other day, and was that a chattel, a houseboat? Because you can move it, but there's a long wrangling argument about whether a houseboat is a chattel, but not things that sort of nail to the ground, as it were, like buildings. Yes, so it's a chance to create harmony, and it's really important when you do all these documents to sort of communicate with the people in your life, and that's not always easy. I mean, a lot of people don't like to talk about money. They don't like. Within families there can be very complex things going on, and I've seen the whole range. But generally speaking, people that I've been lucky enough to work with are quite willing to go and talk to their children, talk to the important people in their lives about what they've done and what they're thinking, and that is the best thing. And if you're going to exclude somebody, you can do that, but you then really would be advised to sort of write down why you're doing that. And there can be legitimate reasons to do that, but so that you're, it's not that you've just overlooked it or that you haven't thought about it. That can be relevant. So you're really communicating, starting with that sense of fairness, and then we have this just preparation really for the dying process. Just got a few more minutes. I'll just reflect. Does anybody? Yeah.
If you don't have a will, but
Yeah.
you have parents, for example, does your estate just automatically go across there, and how would it be, and what would happen because there's no executor?
So the question was, what happens if you don't have a will? That's a good question. If you don't have a will, it's called intestacy, and in those circumstances, instead of having executors, you have what's called administrators. It's the same thing, really. So somebody would apply to administer your estate, and there's an order in which goods are given away. So the law decides for you, effectively, what your will is. And that would be that it would go, a lot of it to a spouse, if you had a spouse, or a civil partner. A lot of it would then go to the children. If you didn't have a spouse or children, then it would go to your parents. If it wasn't your parents, weren't alive, it would go to siblings, and then so on. There's a few more categories down the line. Yeah, but it rarely does exactly what you would want it to do. Yeah, but often it's good enough. Yeah.
Let's say you inherit your parents' house. How would inheritance tax come into that? Like if you sold their house, would you then pay inheritance tax on that afterwards, something like that?
Yeah. So we've got a tax question. So now I'm gonna 2 minutes of tax. Inheritance tax is called a voluntary tax. Because if you don't own anything when you die, you don't pay inheritance tax. So it is actually a voluntary tax. But understandably, some people don't want to give everything away before they die, and then you couldn't give away your house to your children and then live in your house. You'd actually have to move out. I don't know, live in a tent or something, and survive for 7 years, and then it would be free of tax. But it's actually worth saying that a will is a chance to look at your whole estate and look at what you really need, and that is a practice that many people do. They say, okay, there is a tax problem. I've got, maybe if you own, say, £1 million, which many people do, or they do between a couple, it looks like there might be a tax liability. What can we give away? What do we not need? What can we? So tax can have a positive aspect of kind of forcing you to. My grandmother was very good about this. I remember she didn't have much. She had a bungalow, but they moved to an even smaller bungalow, and then they gave away all their things, and so they hardly had anything by the time that she died. And I hope to emulate my grandmother one day, but I'm not at that phase of life yet. So it is an opportunity. But if you inherited your parents' house, to answer the question, you pay tax on death if the house is over a certain value. Yeah, not when you sell it. Yeah.
So if you give the gift away and it's a large amount,
Yes.
let's just say you give a house away, for example, and 7 years goes past,
Yes.
and you don't live in the house,
Yes.
then do your children pay tax then?
Yeah, so there's a rule that says if you've given away property and you've lived a certain number of years and you've truly given it away, I mean, you can't just sort of, give away something and continue to use it. But, if you've given something away, then after 3 years the tax reduces, and after 7 years it's gone.
Okay, thank
So
you.
then it's no longer considered part of your estate for taxable purposes. Charities also, you see, giving to charities is tax-free. So there's a big incentive to, if you give away 10% of your estate to a charity, and then you have a tax liability, that tax liability is reduced by about 10%. So, the government encourages people to give to charity by not taxing the amounts that go to charity, and by offering a bit of an incentive if you've got a large estate that might be subject to tax. So, yeah. How are we doing? One more question, yeah?
I was just wondering, because my father always had the ethos that the family home would be always there for the family.
Yes.
But he gave it to my brother, but my brother then just turned around and said, I can't come over for holidays. Is there anything I can do about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of question that you would take to a solicitor, and there may be, I don't know, but that's obviously, there are these things, and I've seen this a lot between sibling groups, that a lot of tensions can emerge over when houses have devolved down the generations, a lot of tensions and arguments. I looked after mum for 10 years, I should have this, and and understandable, and there's high tensions, and people can argue over a shoestring, actually, never mind a house. So, I can't answer that question now, but maybe we could have a chat afterwards if you really want to go into that a bit. But really, you need to take proper advice. So, just to conclude, what I would say is, a will is a document that you're just going to do again and again as you go through your life. You could do it at any age. Typically, it's not something that young people think about, as unless they have either got a lot of money or they've got children. When I say young, I mean below 40. But then when you start seeing the reality of your parents dying or your friends dying, that often jolts people into writing a will. And of course, if you yourself get a diagnosis or you get to the end part of your life, that's a big incentive. Still, people don't do it. But you're just creating the best possible conditions that you can do with a will to think about your life and to create a document that's going to be probably the most valuable document that you'd ever write, because it gives away all of your possessions in one go, and to really think about that, and to, from a Buddhist perspective, to realise that could really help you with the letting go process. Clearly, the dying process, it's a mystery. We all have to enter into it, and it's all going to manifest in different ways for each of us. What is beyond death, again, is a mystery to me anyway. But I think it's really interesting when people write wills that you are thinking about when you're dead, and it is meaningful. It's meaningful. We're not completely terribly nihilistic. We're not people. We can say that we're nihilistic, but we care, and it's not just about. If we were deeply nihilistic, you'd probably say, "Doesn't matter," But we're not. We do care, and we care about the things that in our lives. It's just a chance to really reflect on that, and to know that you will, at least on one level, there'll be a continuance of life. And personally, I'm very open to the fact that there is a mystery that we enter into, and getting these legal documents sorted, even if it's provisional, because you keep changing them, is a really, really good idea. Hey, it's a really good idea to get a will. That's it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Satyadasa, for a very wide-ranging introduction, changing tack for us, and bringing what might be considered as a sort of administrative requirement to life, and giving us the spiritual significance of it. I hope it doesn't sound too contrived, but the London Buddhist Centre is a charity. If you wanted to consider leaving some of your legacy, we'll certainly use your money very wisely.
Should I have said that?
No. Just you being here.
It was implicit.
Communicates.
Well, I don't mind giving my art. So.
We'd very much appreciate your art. Yeah, I'm sure we'll find a place for it. Good. Okay, so we're going to eat again now. So it's dinner time. There's a curry. I'm assuming it's going to be all laid out for us. Yeah, it should be in. I think in the small shrine room, we're going to be serving that. It's donation, so just give what you can for that. And then the next thing in here will be at 7:15, Mitra ceremonies and a puja. So yeah, it's a long day, but I hope you can stay for that and yeah, really celebrate the people becoming Mitras. But thanks again to Satyadasa.
It's funny, I was thinking about Bleak House when you were talking.